The United States has the largest economy in the history of human civilization. Its citizens own more cars, more square footage per person, more consumer goods of every description than any population that has ever lived. By almost every material measure available, Americans are among the wealthiest people who have ever existed on Earth. They are also, by many measures, among the most anxious. Rates of anxiety and depression in wealthy countries have been rising for decades. Studies consistently show that above a moderate income threshold, enough to meet basic needs and provide stability, additional wealth adds almost nothing to day-to-day emotional well-being. The people most consumed by the pursuit of more tend not to be the people who report feeling the most alive, and yet the pursuit continues, accelerating, generating more, acquiring more, optimizing more, with the satisfaction perpetually deferred to the next milestone, the next acquisition, the next version of the life that will finally feel like enough. There is a word in Japanese for what is missing from this picture. The word is Chisoku, and it means simply knowing that you have enough. Chisoku comes from a line in the Tao Te Ching, the ancient Chinese text attributed to Laozi in the 5th century BCE. He who knows he has enough is rich. The concept was absorbed into Japanese culture through Zen Buddhism and became a foundational principle of the aesthetic and philosophical tradition that shaped everything from tea ceremony to garden design to the architecture of the traditional Japanese home. In Japanese, the characters that compose Chisoku mean literally to know and sufficiency or enough. It is not a passive concept, not resignation, not the absence of ambition, not a philosophical excuse for complacency. It is an active cognitive act, the deliberate practice of recognizing what is already present, rather than organizing attention entirely around what is absent. The distinction matters. Chisoku does not say that wanting things is wrong. It does not say that improvement is futile or that effort is pointless. What it says is something more precise, that if you cannot experience satisfaction in the present, you will not experience it in the future either. That the capacity to recognize sufficiency is a skill, not a circumstance. That it can be cultivated, or it can be left uncultivated. And the difference is not determined by how much you accumulate. The samurai tradition encoded this directly. The code of Bushido placed great emphasis on the warrior, who had mastered his desires not because desire was shameful, but because the warrior, whose contentment depended on outcomes, could be controlled through those outcomes. The person who has internalized Chisoku cannot be manipulated by the threat of taking what he has, because he has already made peace with having exactly this much. The freedom that comes from sufficiency is not weakness. In the samurai worldview, it was the precondition for genuine strength. The evidence from psychology and behavioral economics maps almost exactly onto this ancient claim. The phenomenon researchers call hedonic adaptation describes something that anyone who has made a significant purchase has already observed: the new car, the bigger apartment, the promotion. Each produces a period of elevated satisfaction, and then the satisfaction fades. The new level becomes the baseline. The gap between what you have and what you want reconstitutes itself at the new level. The restlessness returns. This process is not a character flaw. It appears to be a design feature of the human nervous system, one that was useful in an environment of genuine scarcity, where dissatisfaction with current conditions motivated the acquisition of more food, more shelter, more security. In an environment of genuine lack, the system that never fully settles is adaptive. It keeps pushing toward more. In an environment of surplus, which is the environment most people reading this inhabit, the same system produces the opposite of its intended function. The drive that was designed to get you to enough now prevents you from recognizing that you are already there. The baseline rises continuously. The gap never closes. The satisfaction that was supposed to be the reward for acquisition keeps moving away from you at the same rate you move toward it. A landmark study by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton found that emotional well-being, the quality of everyday experience, plateaus at a household income of around $75,000 per year in the United States. Beyond that threshold, more money does not produce more positive emotion in daily life. What people report beyond that number is not more happiness, but more narrative satisfaction, the sense that their life story sounds good, that they are winning by the metrics they have been given. The story improves. The experience does not follow. What Chisoku represents is not an attempt to override the hedonic treadmill through willpower or discipline. It is something more fundamental, the cultivation of a different form of attention, one that is capable of registering what is already present, rather than automatically scanning for what is missing. The Zen teachers who transmitted this concept in Japan were direct about where it applies most intensely. It applies to time. Most people experience their days as insufficient. Not enough hours, not enough accomplished, not enough progress toward goals that keep expanding at the same rate they are met. The person who completes the list finds a new list. The person who reaches the milestone discovers another milestone beyond it. The restlessness is not in the schedule. It is in the mode of attention. It applies to relationships. The person who approaches every interaction scanning for what the other is not, providing, will find reliably that no one is providing enough. The person who cultivates attention to what is actually being offered, the presence, the effort, the imperfect expression of care finds the same interactions to be rich. The relationship has not changed. The attention has. It applies to work. The practitioner who can recognize when a piece of work is genuinely complete, not perfect, but sufficient to its purpose, finishes things. The practitioner who cannot recognize sufficiency refinishes them indefinitely, past the point of improvement, past the point of diminishing returns, because the internal register of enough is not functioning. There is a phrase in the tea ceremony tradition that captures this with unusual precision. It is ichigo ichi-e, each encounter, once. The idea that this particular gathering, this particular conversation, this particular moment of tea, being poured and received, will never occur again in precisely this form. And therefore it is in itself complete, not a rehearsal for something better, not an approximation of an ideal. The thing itself once. Chisoku and ichigo ichi-e are related by the same logic. Sufficiency is not a quantity. It is a recognition. The moment, the relationship, the work, the life, they can be experienced as perpetually insufficient, or they can be experienced as genuinely here. The difference is not in what is present. It is in whether you are capable of registering what is present as real. The practical question is how this recognition is cultivated. And here the tradition is specific. It begins with noticing, which sounds obvious, but is more difficult than it sounds. For most people in wealthy environments, the default mode of attention is comparative, scanning what is available against an implicit standard of what could be available and finding the gap. The practice of Chisoku is the practice of interrupting this scan long enough to register what is actually here. Not gratitude journaling, which can become mechanical. Not affirmations, which can slide into a kind of performance. Something more direct, a momentary shift of attention. From the gap to the ground. From what is missing to what is present. From the trajectory to the position. This is not a permanent state, and it does not need to be. The research on what is sometimes called savoring, the deliberate engagement with positive present experience, suggests that even brief periods of this kind of attention change the emotional valence of a day significantly, not by adding anything to it, by registering what is already there. The Zen garden at Ryoanji, 15 stones arranged in raked gravel, is one of the most visited sites in Japan. People sit in front of it for hours. It does not give them anything. It has no more content than it had when they arrived. What changes slowly, for those who stay long enough, is the quality of their attention. The garden is exactly sufficient. And eventually, if you sit still long enough, so apparently is everything. Wealthy cultures get happiness wrong not because they lack the resources for it, but because they have built entire economies and cultural systems around the perpetual insufficiency of what is already present, around the conviction that the next acquisition will produce what the last one failed to. Chisoku does not promise that wanting disappears. It promises something smaller and more real, that if you can learn to recognize sufficiency even briefly, even imperfectly, you will find it has been here the whole time. That may not be a comfortable answer, but it has the considerable advantage of being true. If this kind of inquiry, the kind that sits still long enough to question what we actually need, is something you want more of, follow for more.